Henry had always lived alone in his countryside home, deep in the heart of rural England. A quiet life suited him until one cold, windy night, something changed. The wind howled, rattling the windows as Henry sat by the fire, sipping his tea. Then, he heard a soft knock at the door. It was midnight, and no one ever came at that hour. He stood up, heart pounding, and approached the door. "Who's there?" he called, but only silence answered. The knocking persisted, soft but insistent. Against his better judgment, Henry opened the door. There was no one there, just the cold wind and the eerie emptiness of the night. But then, something caught his eye: footprints in the snow, leading away from his door and disappearing into the darkness. Confused and unnerved, Henry stepped back inside and bolted the door. But just as he turned away, the knocking resumed, this time louder, more urgent. Panic surged through him. He rushed to the window, peering out into the night. Nothing, but the knocking wouldn't stop. Now echoing through the entire house, as if it was coming from every door and window at once. Henry's breath quickened as he backed away from the window. The knocking grew louder, now accompanied by a faint whisper, as though someone or something was calling his name. "Henry, let me in." The voice was soft, almost pleading. Yet it chilled him to his core. His hands shook as he pressed his back against the door, desperate to keep it shut. But then he heard a creak behind him. Someone or something was inside the house. Henry spun around, but the room was empty. The knocking had stopped. The house fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire. He thought he must have imagined it. But then, slowly, the temperature in the room dropped. His breath turned to mist. And the fire flickered out. In the darkness, he heard it again: Henry ... But this time, it was right behind him. Terrified, Henry turned around slowly, but there was no escape. A pale, ghostly woman stood in front of him, her face half hidden in shadows. Her eyes were hollow, her skin deathly white, and her mouth twisted into a cruel smile. "You let me in," she whispered, her cold breath on his face. "Now you're mine." The last thing Henry heard before everything went dark was the sound of the door creaking open once more. The next morning, the villagers found Henry's house empty. The front door was wide open, snow drifting inside, but there was no sign of Henry, only the footprints leading away into the forest. They whispered about the midnight guest, a spirit who comes knocking, waiting for someone to let her in. So if you hear a knock in the dead of night, think twice before you open the door. And if you survive this story, subscribe for more haunting tales that'll keep you awake at night.